I'm Charlie Bright of Gold Derby, and as part of our Meet the Experts television animation panel, I'm speaking with Bryan Lee O'Malley and BenDavid Grabinski from the Netflix original show Scott Pilgrim Takes Off. First question I wanted to ask you, and I'll put this to Bryan first, and BenDavid, if there's anything you want to add on to it, please do. What made you want to revisit the story of Scott Pilgrim and these characters after being so iconically done as a film a couple years ago?
Yeah, I mean that was the first question I had to ask myself, but actually like Netflix and Edgar had spoken on Edgar Wright, the director of the film, had already spoken, and I heard Science Saru was interested, and they're one of my favorite Japanese anime studios. So once I heard that, I couldn't stop thinking about it, and although it didn't seem fruitful or exciting to revisit the movie, which had already been done so fantastically. Like everyone would just be comparing it. So I thought, what could I do? What else could I do? And then one day I was having dinner with my friend BenDavid, and he had some really kind of out of pocket ideas, and we were joking around, and it all just kind of was right, and it became the show.
Yeah, Brian's gut instinct was that he didn't want to do the same story for a fourth time between the books and the movie and the video game. But we were both really excited about the idea of Science Saru doing something in the world of Scott Pilgrim. So I came up with some very harebrained ideas to how to shake things up and do a brand new version of the story that no one was expecting, that would also give Science Saru an opportunity to do something that just didn't feel like a cover. It just felt like a waste of everyone's time creatively to us to just have someone do the same beats again, but just in a different medium. And that was at least our intention.
What led to the show having such an anime look to it? Was it because of the studio that you guys used, and why did you want that as part of the show, as part of the show's look and personality?
I mean, we both were huge anime fans, like in high school and stuff. So the kind of '90s hand-drawn anime always appealed to me. It was a big influence on me doing the Scott Pilgrim books. So like I said, I love Science Star. I love everything that they've done. Their founder, Masaki Yuasa, is like a brilliant genius, and they've taken other properties and turned them on their heads, like Devilman Crybaby. So I was just excited to see what I could do if I was kind of playing in a larger field with them in this new medium that I never worked in before.
Yeah, it was like a bucket list thing for me, but something I thought was never possible was that I get to make an anime show because I'm a live action director and writer and producer, and I never made animation, and Bryan had never made a show. But when Netflix decided that they were going to do a series with Science Saru, a company that we had so much respect for, it was just really creatively inspiring because it's like, okay, well, I was already a huge fan of everything they made. Like, how can I create something and write something that, unleashes their imagination in the best way possible? And it tonally and stylistically felt correct because Bryan's like artwork in his book always felt very manga inspired. And we're both just fans of those stories and like the way that they're told visually anyway. So it just felt like a great opportunity for us. And also, there's a lot of ideas that I have that usually get killed in budget form because if the show was live action, it would cost as much as Avatar. So the great thing about this medium too is we got to think as big as possible and like not have fights that we were worried about, scheduling and how difficult the stunts would be.
And I'm also curious as to how did you decide where you were going to break off the story from the book and the movie? How did you make that decision?
So my initial pitch, when we weren't even having a meet, like an
Should
actual
should we
business
keep it a
meeting.
little spoiler vague?
Are we assuming that no one has seen it?
We can
I
keep
would
it a
assume
little bit
I
vague.
would assume some people have seen it, but it's up to you guys.
I mean, I guess it's like we decided that the first fight, those traditional story of Scott Pilgrim is a guy meets a girl, finds out he has to defeat her seven evil exes in order to date her. And the initial pitch was, well, what if that fight went a lot differently, and then what if the story got completely reshifted in the aftermath of it? I guess is the way of putting it. And everything came from that decision, which is that we thought you'd have the same setup, and then we would throw a gigantic curveball at the audience. And then it was an attempt mostly to try to make a show that Ramona was driving the story. That creatively to us was the most interesting idea, is that Scott has had so much time in the sun. What if we kind of let Ramona be in the driver's seat for a bit?
What were some of the biggest challenges you faced as showrunners for this program?
Just we kind of set the tone, and it's this weird hybrid anime, international co-production. And for me, it was all about the respect and just having that. It was like international, like, geopolitics every day, just trying to figure out who's happy and how to keep them happy. And that for me was like fascinating work.
I mean, the simple, dumb answer is just scheduling. It's that we had more than a dozen very successful actors who we are using that were also in the movie, who were very happy to do the show, but they're all incredibly busy and all over the world. And figuring out how to record all of them in a schedule that worked was unbelievably difficult. And it all worked out, but there was some times where it's like one person wasn't available for 11 months, and then because they had a commitment on another show, and then a week after they're wrapping, we were doing a sound mix for like one of their key episodes. So you'd have to like shift everything to make sure that you could get that person and all of their dialogue done in time for this when everyone else had done theirs like 11 months earlier. Just a lot of sort of chaotic things in that sense. But otherwise, the difficulty was just we wanted it to be fresh and exciting and different and kind of risky. And we sort of created a lot of, we created problems for ourselves just by virtue of not wanting to do the expected version of the show.
You mentioned that you have these voice performers, and it was, I think, all the main English cast from the movie returned to voice their characters in the show. I'm curious as to was there a voice performance that I don't want to say was better than the others, but was there one that surprised you in terms of what you ended up getting that you weren't expecting?
There were definitely a few that were even surprising themselves. I think for some people, it was kind of their first animation work. Johnny Simmons, in particular, who played young Neil. I remember he was just on Zoom, and he was a tiny little window, and I just remember him cracking us all up from that tiny little window all day.
Yeah, there's some people made things much funnier than I was even expecting them to be. I mean, the really fun thing is just you'll think about a line for 2 years, and then someone comes in, sees it for the first time, and then they're coming from it in such a left field way that you were not expecting. I'd say that everyone who I thought would be great was great. Ellen surprised me just in how much she went for it, who played Knives Chow. Like, I knew she'd be good, but she had zero animation experience, and she was doing everything at 1,000 miles per hour, and brought so much personality and energy to the character that I thought it was incredibly additive. And she just had such a great attitude. But I was very happy with everyone, and I was happy that Brandon Routh was as funny as I thought he would be. He's been in everything I've made, and I just always think he's like an A+ goofball, and he doesn't get to be one enough. So
Unsung
Yeah.
hero.
Yeah, he really does. He really is underrated. It needs to be seen more as a comedic actor because he is very funny. Music is so integral to this story on so many levels. What was it? What was it like to get the right sound for the music for the show?
I mean, the first thing we did was hired Anna Monoguchi, who had done the music for the Scott Pilgrim video game. And I knew from their other work that they could do pretty much anything. They're real chameleons. So it was their first show. We teamed them up with BenDavid's good friend, our good friend, Joe Trapanese, who's an amazing composer. He's done a million things.
yeah, and he does all of my stuff, but he had worked together with like Daft Punk and some other bands doing some scores. So we thought, well, it might be really interesting to mix them together. And then it became music is so much of the show. I mean, we wrote music, we wrote a musical. I'm now like in some sort of music writers guild thing. I have like a lot of music writing credits on this show, which I've never had before. But we would split up the work where Bryan would work on the original songs, then I would work on the score because there's just so much to deal with. And then we would like share with each other, like where we'd ended up on things. And then we didn't even have a music supervisor. Like Bryan and I just picked all of our needle drops too. It was like a very intensive process doing all the music. And like I flew to Nashville to do like for our orchestra of it. And then the soundtrack, I think I spent more time on than the actual show. I can't believe even accurately describe how many meetings I had to have about our vinyl soundtrack release, which I think I'm very proud of. I think it's a very cool looking object to put on a shelf, and it's a good mixture of music because there's so much stuff. I have to figure out what was going to be on there. But I mean, I say most of the time that I make movies and TV shows to put music in them.
It's like a big mixtape. Yeah.
Yeah, it's one of my favorite parts about the job. Whenever I'm writing, I'm thinking about music. When Bryan and I were writing, we would always send ideas back and forth. It feel like half the songs that are in the show, it's like almost 50-50 between the two of us, where we just accidentally, like, half the end credit songs are mine, half were his, but our rule was everything that was in there we both had to like. But Scott Pilgrim is music. I mean, it's about people and bands. There's always a strong musical element, and we just needed to figure out a way to do that, but also not feel like it was a retread, but still have an homage to the other elements.
Well, I mean, man, the songs for animation, we had to make up the songs months and months earlier than anything else, just so the animators could get their hands on them. So that was its own challenge too. But it was, yeah, I feel like my whole brain was exercised making this show.
Yeah, I mean, out of anything I've ever made, you had to just have so many different approaches that you have to handle, from music to performance to sound to editing to everything. And then also just the logistics of making a show with an international company that's never had an outside showrunner, or English speaking showrunner. So every part of it was just, you know, an adventure that there was no real rule book to
but fortunately, like, we were in such safe hands with Science Sorrow, because they really are all they're cracked up to be. They're perfect.
I mean, I've been a huge fan of theirs ever since they did this episode of Adventure Time called Food Chain. And I had gone down a rabbit hole after seeing that and like checking out all of their stuff. So when Bryan said they were going to do the show, that is the jet fuel that just makes you feel like, I have to do this. It makes all of it worth it, because at the end of the day, they're just going to deliver on a level that there's just so much specificity to their work. There's so much like joy in the design. And I just feel like grateful that we got to work with them.
Yeah. Once they were on board, I knew we could put everything together and make something that's really, really magical for the fans. And I think the response has been really great.
Well, Bryan and BenDavid, thank you so much for joining us, and we look forward to seeing you on our panel in just a little bit.
Thanks.
Thank you.